Hey everyone, welcome back to Prescribed Vibes. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Stephanie, and today we're going to talk about something every single one of us has felt at some point: regret. Specifically, what happens when we put our trust in ourselves. In our last episode, we spoke about building self trust. What is self trust? And sometimes we make a choice, and then later we feel that choice has led us down the wrong path. So that's what we're going to cover today.
Yeah, when we finished talking last week, I had that thought about what happens when that goes wrong. Maybe we should talk about that and give everyone some pointers. And so, self-trust is not an infallible thing, but it is important to build within ourselves and to know how to be resilient when it doesn't work out. So, we're going to call it navigating regret when self-trust goes wrong, but really this episode's about healing and reframing and finding your way back to yourself.
So, if you've ever replayed a decision over and over in your head, asking yourself, what was I thinking? I know many of us have been there. This episode's for you.
So let's start with the basics. Self-trust is the belief that you can rely on yourself, your judgment, your instincts, your inner compass. It's what allows us to make decisions without always outsourcing them to others. We covered all of that as far as self-trust goes in our last episode. So if you missed that, go ahead and go back and listen to that one first.
And, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking that here's the paradox that the more we practice self trust, the more risks we're willing to take. And then sometimes those risks don't really turn out the way we envision them. And that's okay because we don't want to stop taking those risks, but we are going to talk about what that regret feels like and what you can do about it.
Right. It can be as big as trusting yourself to choose the right career or partner, or as small as trusting yourself to skip the gym or splurge on something and then later regretting that decision.
Speaking of that, when you talked about something as small as skipping the gym, sometimes I go really hard. I get this idea where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to go hard and this is how I'm going to do it. And then later my body's like, what were you thinking? And I'm just like back into this spiral of like, oh no, did I do it wrong? Like, that whole phrase, what was I thinking? Because I had the right intentions and I thought it was going to go so well. And then it just really requires us to take a step back, evaluate, and not be so hard on ourselves. But really, the regret can feel like proof that we just haven't trusted ourselves. And maybe that's gone on for a while. And it creates that spiral that I talked about. I can't trust myself anymore. I mess everything up. And then it can take a toll on that self talk.
Yeah, that's such an important part. Regret in of itself can damage our self-trust if we don't navigate and process through that in a way that is going to reinforce, hey, everything's okay. We can trust ourselves even though this didn't go well. Let's try again. One of my favorite quotes, if you failed, you're just not done yet. I think that's something that really helps me with mitigating some regret and allowing me to trust in myself is it's okay if it didn't work out. Take the next right step, keep going.
I like that quote. I really like this video from Will Smith that he posted a really long time ago about
Mhm.
fail often, keep
Fail
failing,
forward.
right? Fail
Yeah,
forward. Yeah.
so good.
So let's unpack regret. When we talk about regret, we think of sometimes it's a mix, right, of feelings: sadness, disappointment, self blame about something we did or didn't do. It can be just a roller coaster. You can have some conflicting thoughts of, well, maybe this was the right choice, maybe it wasn't. So just keep in mind that it can feel like a roller coaster, and that's okay. I want us to make sure we normalize that you can experience a whole variety of feelings.
Yeah, and regret serves a purpose. Everything our brain does for us Sometimes it feels like against us, but it's for us. It all has a purpose. And so it points us toward our values. If we regret snapping at our partner, it means kindness and patience are something that we value, and we were acting out of character in that moment. But it can also be a function of wanting to feel in control as well. And so trying to find that point of control through regret of, if I would have just done it this way, here's where I could have gone differently to have a different outcome. And the reality is we can't go back and change those outcomes. And so staying in that space of regret and self-doubt just isn't productive.
And to add to that control you were just talking about, I would say too that it's also feedback. It's data that we can take back and figure out, it's something that our inner compass is really trying to recalibrate. And just like you talked about earlier, about let's take a look at our values and see what's really important to me. And did I operate from that space or did I derail?
Yeah, I think the challenge is, instead of using the regret as information, we usually weaponize it against ourselves. So we turn that into shame. I should have known better. I can't be trusted. Why would I do that? I'm so stupid. And that's just not helpful.
Oh yeah, totally. I've been labeling that into like self-harm. Like, why am I harming myself this
Mm.
way? I look at it as a way of self-harming. Not that shame doesn't have its own function, but really it's a cue that healing has to start and learning how to separate our actions from our self-worth.
Yeah. Let's bring this down to real life. I'll throw out a few common regret scenarios and we'll kind of talk through that. So, relationships are a big point of regret, trusting yourself to stay or leave a partner and later wondering if you made the wrong decision. Our careers, so taking a job, leaving a job, starting a business, and it not going well. Parenting or family decisions, so wondering if you've handled a child's behavior right or if you've done wrong by someone that you love and care about. And health choices, regretting eating habits, skipping exercise, ignoring warning signs from your body that something's going wrong and not noticing or having it addressed until it's too late. Those are just a few of the common things. Obviously, it can bleed into any aspect of life, but we all kind of cross paths with these particular areas that have potential for regret.
And really, each scenario you just talked about really hits home. If you notice each scenario, the relationships, career, parenting, health choices, they all involve trusting yourself in that given moment. So you go with your gut, your impulse, and you decide, I'm going to move forward. This is what I'm going to do. And you put your best foot forward with the information you have and the energy and awareness, and then it doesn't turn out to be the way you wanted it to be. And I think that's what we're going to get into today is how to heal from that and how to move forward in a more positive way.
Yeah, we can be really unfair with ourselves using the knowledge and the information that we have in hindsight against ourselves, as if we knew those things in the moment when we made the decision that we made. And so we're like, see, you messed up, you should have known. But in the moment, realistically, we were making the best choice we could with the information that we had.
So true. This reminds me of EMDR when you do sometimes EMDR with clients that talk about, oh, I wish I had known or beat themselves up. And it's like that positive core belief becomes, I did the best I could. Because really, it's so unfair to us that we think we can have all this knowledge when it's something to do with the future. So we can only ever decide based on the version of ourselves that exists in that moment and remind yourself that you didn't have that information with you in order to make better decisions or decisions that are going to give you the outcome that you planned for.
So let's talk practical. How do you actually rebuild self trust after regret?
So, the first step I would say is acknowledging the regret without judgment, which is can be
Mm.
hard because that's where we beat ourselves up and we wish we did things differently. So, an example would be say something like, I'm feeling regret about this choice. That is much different than saying, I'm a failure for making this choice. So, if you listen carefully, I'm feeling regret. You're sticking to what feeling you have and you just keep it simple.
Exactly. Our wording is so important and the way that we talk to ourselves. And so, even just a small tweak like that can make quite the difference where we're like labeling a feeling versus identifying in that way. And so, pay attention to that. Step two, extract the lesson. What is this regret teaching me about my values, my needs, what I want to see or do differently next time? Use that information. Again, like Will Smith said, fail forward. Learn from it, take that with you, and then it's not a loss. We still get to grow and change or do something different next time as a result of that experience.
Exactly. And I know at the beginning I said for step one, saying it without judgment. So step three is offering yourself that self compassion. If your best friend, mom, sister, family member had made that same choice, would you tell that person that they're unworthy? Or would you say, hey, you tried, you learned, you gave it your best, you'll do better next time? So it's sometimes so much easier to say that to someone else, and we need to start practicing that self compassion towards ourselves.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's the angle is okay, pretend that your friend is telling you about this situation. What would you say to them? Kind of remove yourself, take your ego out of the equation, and we might get a little bit further when we're looking at it a little more objectively. Step four, create a plan. Sometimes regret comes from real consequences. Maybe you need to apologize. Maybe adjust your habits, set new boundaries. Taking one small step toward repair builds back trust.
Yeah, I really like that one. It's a way to go back and reevaluate. For step five is going back to practicing small self trust reps. So don't expect to rebuild overnight. Start with tiny decisions. What do I feel like eating? Take your time, right? Do I need rest or movement right now? And it's something I've been practicing myself ever since I regretted my decision of going so hard at the gym. It was like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what is my body telling me right now and asking yourself those simple questions. What do I feel like right now? What do I need? And just building those small self trust reps.
I love that. Self trust is like a muscle. Regret might injure it, but with rehab and reps, it'll get stronger.
So let's guide our listeners through a quick reflection. Whether you're listening to us on TikTok Live or you're driving, we just simply want you to listen. If you're just somewhere safe, you can close your eyes and think of a regret you're carrying it. So if you're carrying regret, think about that and notice where you feel it in your body. Is there tension in your chest? Heaviness in your stomach, whatever it is, just simply notice it. Now, once you're noticing, I want you to remind yourself that version of me did the best I could with what I knew. So you can repeat that to yourself. That version of me did the best I could with what I knew. And then you can move on into asking yourself, what is this regret teaching me about what I value? So you can sit in that space and think about, what is it teaching me? What are my values? Once you're done going through that, so let's just take a moment just to think about it, what it's teaching you. You can whisper to yourself, I forgive myself, I'm learning, and I can be trusted again.
I love that. That reminds me a lot of shadow work and calling to the forefront past versions of yourself that you reject out of shame, out of regret, where you don't allow yourself to identify with those versions of you. And that leads to rejecting versions of us, which doesn't feel good and affects our esteem. And so going back and making repair with all those different versions of yourself and saying, hey, I know that you were doing the best you could with what you had. I understand. No one understands better than I do what you were feeling and what you were experiencing in that moment. And I'm sorry that I haven't been there for you and I've rejected you rather than comforted you or consoled you about that. We did the best we could with what we had. You're not wrong for that. And I'm no longer going to reject this version of myself. She's part of what got me to where I am and why I am the person that I am today. So even a small shift, just moving from shame to self-forgiveness, starts to rebuild that process of self-trust, but also esteem and our identity all gets tied into that as well. So here's a big takeaway. Regret doesn't mean that you can't trust yourself. It means you're human, you're growing, you care enough to reflect. Again, if you failed, you're just not done yet. We're human. We're all going to fail at some point or another. If we stay focused on the regret part, we lose sight of what we learn and how to move forward and proceed from there.
Exactly. I really like how you modeled that too and what to tell yourself. I think sometimes the regret, depending on the decision, if it was a big decision, just to be realistic, that feeling can feel very intense and then shame grows. And if you dwell on that, which is it's not easy sometimes, but really the point I'm trying to make is that the quicker you acknowledge, the quicker you go through those steps and talk to yourself without judgment, use the self-compassion, the easier it'll be for you to be able to learn, let go, and not close that door on self-trust. Allow it to be a teacher, and sometimes it's okay. It may take longer, right? As you practice this and you have a really, really intense feeling of regret, it can take a while to go from those feelings to process to being in a different space. But use the steps, they really work, and allow yourself to learn.
Exactly. For myself, and maybe this is helpful for you guys as well, before I make a tough decision, and we don't always have the opportunity to do this, but if we do, before we make a tough decision, I sit with myself like, okay, this is the decision that I have landed on, and I proactively have no regrets about it. I tell myself before I even follow through with that decision, if this goes wrong, that's okay. I didn't do anything wrong. I can still trust myself, but I'm making this decision with the information that I have. And so if it goes wrong, that's okay. I'll learn from it. Deciding in advance, I'm not going to give myself space to regret this if it goes poorly. So, if this episode resonated with you, take one small step this week to celebrate a decision that you made that turned out well. Balance the regret with the acknowledgement of your wins. Not everything is bad. We're not constantly failing ourselves, but a little bit of negativity goes a long way. So, we really got to be pretty adamant about filtering that out.
Yeah, totally. Got to reel it in. And remember, you're not alone in this. Sierra and I have our regrets too. We're doing this together. We're learning to lean back into trust. And like we always say, if it's difficult to find a therapist or you can't afford it, remember there's also interns, there's coaches. You can confide in a friend, someone that you really trust to process this, use journaling. You could use some of the questions and the steps we went over today and really try your best to get into that rhythm, to get into the practice of the steps so that you can get the most out of it and you can heal.
Exactly. Today's vibes are prescribed as no regrets. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. Until next time, keep tuning into yourself and keep aligning with your values.
Bye.
Bye.